Welcome back to Awaken Exchanges. I'm your host, Jay Rich, and we've got another disclosure-related episode for you this week. In a very special episode, we're actually teaming up with the Hush Hush Society's Conspiracy Hour to talk about the Bob Lazar story. I'm so grateful that you keep joining us here for the exchange, but remember, if you have any suggestions for topics or guests, I do listen to the listeners, so please email me from our website or contact me on Twitter at Awaken Exchanges. I hope you're as excited for this topic as I am. I'm going to try and keep this week's intro brief, but I want to thank the Hush Hush Society for coming on to the exchange and sharing this great conversation with me. On their normal podcast, they explore a lot of topics that I have personally dove into and always have found interesting. From their beginning talk about the Philadelphia experiment and MK Ultra, on through the assassination of JFK, the supposed suicide of Jeffrey Epstein, and on to aliens in Area 51, topics like we cover on our show today. I hope that you get a chance to check out their show, as I am pretty sure you're going to enjoy it for yourselves. I know I did. As for today's topic, if you haven't heard the name Bob Lazar before, then you might be living under a rock. Either that or you haven't explored UFO disclosure much before, as he was the original UFO whistleblower back in 1989. We'll get into his past as well as the things that people use to discredit him, but the more his story stays the same over the years, the more evidence starts to back him up. He hasn't changed his story at all, and it's rather fascinating what has come to light over the last few years. Now, before we get to the show, here's a brief rundown of our sponsors. First off, I want to thank all of you personally for your support. Just listening to this podcast and sharing it with your friends gives me a reason to keep providing the best content that I can. If you have the means and would like to contribute personally, please take a look at our Patreon page where you'll get access to exclusive content and deals. As for our other sponsors, Awaken Vapes was the first of the Awaken brands and has been helping you modulate your high with CBD-only, high-terpene vape products since 2019. Genesis Farms has been making the highest quality medicinal RSO, among many other fantastic products, starting with the medical community back before 2010. And last but not least, the Caramel Corn Company, bringing you caramel corn the way it was meant to be. And remember, if you enjoy this podcast, please follow us on Spotify, subscribe to us on YouTube, or follow us wherever else you're listening. And if you can, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. I know that every podcast says it, but that's because it really does help spread the word. You can also support us on Patreon or connect with us on the social media of your choice. We are at Awakened Exchanges on Facebook and Instagram, and at Awaken Exchanges on Twitter. All right, now, stay tuned, and thank you for listening to Awakened Exchanges. Genesis Farms was founded on the belief in cannabis's ability to heal. Genesis Farms is more than a brand. They're a compassionate community of like-minded individuals that generate top-quality cannabis products made with love and care. Community outreach is always on their mind, and their partnerships with Grow for Vets and Parents for Pot was just a beginning to what they hope to accomplish in the coming years. You can find their products on the best dispensary shelves across the state of Oregon. Their RSO is the most consistent quality in the state. Their tinctures are second to none, and their personal massage oil will have you and your partner both coming back for more. Find them on Facebook and Instagram, and ask for them in your local dispensary today. Don't forget to listen to Sean's interview here on Awakened Exchanges. It's episode number 3. The Caramel Corn Company is bringing you caramel corn the way it was meant to be, made with premium ingredients in small, handcrafted batches and completely gluten-free. The flavors include original, roasted cashew, salted almond, mixed nut, spicy sriracha, white morsel macadamia, peanut butter, butterscotch, and my personal favorites, chocolate drizzle and raspberry caramel apple. I can't say enough about how delicious this caramel corn is. It makes a great gift any time of the year. You can find them on sale in Portland area Market of Choice locations and online again here real soon. Visit caramelcorncompany.com for more information today. Remember, buying local supports small businesses and keeps your money building your community. And last but not least, Awaken Vapes has been bringing you some of the highest quality CBD vape cartridges since ringing in the new year in 2019. I became passionate about cannabis after a car wreck left me with major migraines, and no prescribed pills helped alleviate any of the symptoms. Having only tried cannabis a handful of times in high school and college, it was a doctor's recommendation that led me to give cannabis another try. Only then did I realize that we'd all been at least a little misled about the health benefits of this amazing plant. Despite the unexpected break because of the vape ban and then a global health crisis, the business is stronger than ever, and we invite you to check out our updated website today. We are still offering our 3 varieties with new improved terpene formulations and enhanced flavor to go along with the custom blended terpene effect profiles. Check back at awakenvapes.com for any updates. You can always email us about wholesaling or white labeling opportunities as well. Welcome to Awakened Exchanges. This week we have 2 very special guests joining me, Mystery Mike and Slick Frank Sanders of the Hush Hush Conspiracy Hour. Thank you guys so much for joining me here today.
Hey, thanks for having us, John.
Yeah, man, it's a pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
Yes, please. I was hoping you guys could tell the audience a little bit about who you are and your guys' podcast.
Sure. We are from the Hush Hush Society Conspiracy Hour. It is myself, Mystery Mike, my cohort, Slick Frank Sanders, and we also have a third host who is not able to join us today, Declassified Dave. And every Monday or every other Monday or so, we release debriefings on different conspiracy theories, ranging from the usual UFO, ufology type stuff to a little more out-of-the-box type things. We also do some interview type stuff with people and also get into cryptids and paranormal type topics.
Awesome. And how did the Hush Hush Society first get started?
It's a common question, actually. We have known each other for a very long time, especially myself and Dave. We've been friends for close to 20 years now, and Frank has always been there. He's been around for close to the same, and we've always talked about doing something, whether it be some sort of show, some sort of YouTube channel, and podcasting just kind of made sense. I had just recently come off of a different podcast, and we had always talked about conspiracy theories and weird stuff, and Frank would always come to me every time that he saw me, and he'd say, "Hey, did you see this? This is wild." And we just kind of translated those conversations to a show and put production on it. And yeah, we've been a show for almost a year now. August 17th, we will have a grand 1-year anniversary. So
very cool. Yeah, I've listened to a bunch of the episodes, and I'm looking forward to going back through the whole catalog at this point. I was going to ask if you guys had any favorite episodes or topics.
That's always a tough one.
Yeah, it's so tough to pick. I really enjoyed it. It was very early in the production of the show, but we did a 2-parter on the Kennedy assassination.
That's on my download list already.
Yup. To this day, that was probably my favorite little project to work on.
Yeah, I would agree. Of the earlier episodes, JFK is definitely up there, but I would say honestly, our upcoming episode on DB Cooper, I think, definitely nails it for me. We kind of went through a little transition phase of the show and how we structured it. And it really shows in the new episode, and I really like the way that it came out. I like the way that it flowed. So I'm gonna say the DB Cooper episode.
I will have to get on top of that one. That's a big local favorite over here. He supposedly jumped out somewhere near one of the towns I used to live in back in middle school. Wow, yeah. So let's see. You guys have, like you said, done an Area 54 or Area 51/S4 rather topic before, and you touched on Bob Lazar, who we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive in here today. What did you take away from the UFO topics you guys have covered so far? Any major beliefs? Do you think anything's going to come from the disclosure we're going to get next week,
that
supposedly?
When that's happening? This next week? It has to be, right?
This 24th, yep.
No way.
24th.
Well, I definitely think there's something to come out of that. I don't necessarily believe that we're going to get the entirety of it. I can't help but feel like they're gonna completely like disclose everything. But yeah, with Bob Lazar in particular, once he kind of, came into the limelight, stuff started to really open up, and I think we're gonna get a pretty meaty portion of information out of that disclosure.
I am, it's a recent revelation for me, and as more disclosure comes out, and you see the ufology community kind of getting, biting at the seam there, it seems to me that a lot of this disclosure is more of a psyop. I feel like so many people and so many believers and so many people within the community were waiting for this for so long that now it almost seems too good to be true. Yeah, there's the Freedom of Information Act, and yeah, we can request all this information regarding this, and the Senate wants the information regarding UFOs and UAPs, but realistically, I feel like they're going to give us enough to satiate us, but also at the same time, I feel like they're giving us false information. They're giving us information to, here's what's in my left hand. Don't watch what I'm doing with my right. And that's always been kind of the history of the United States government. That's always been the history of pretty much any government. And I feel like this disclosure is no different. They're kind of using it as an opportunity to maybe do things behind the scenes and divert attention. There's always the great saying, don't waste a crisis, and not that it's really a crisis or anything, but they're kind of making it out to be, oh, well, there are these unknown aerial phenomenon, and we don't know if they're from China. We don't know if they're from Russia. We don't know if they're off world. Are they here to help us? Are they here to destroy us? And the narrative of them being malicious is being released more so the closer that we get to that disclosure point. And it all boils back to Project Bluebeam. If you really look into Project Bluebeam, it's the preparation for a false flag operation, a fake alien invasion. And throughout the entire history of UFOs, we've never seen them to be malicious. They've never come out and killed anyone, or, obviously there's the abduction stories, and you can believe those or you cannot. But outwardly, looking at UFOs in the sky and alien interaction, there's never been anything that has been malicious. And if you're thinking of a future based colonization, they would have done that already. They wouldn't let us get more technologically advanced and more able to defend ourselves. They would have done that back in the 40s. So I don't know. It's a weary thing for me, and I think that it's more so just something to keep us at bay while the right hand is doing something else.
I can totally see that. And going back to what you said about wasting a crisis, while the UFO UAPs may not be in crisis mode for us right now, going through COVID seems to have been taking over so much of the news that I could see them using that as almost like a smoke screen, covering up some of the information that comes out with a collective shrug in America right now. So before we get too far into the Bob Lazar story, which I do want to go ahead and get into here soon, I just want to say that, I've utilized a lot of his website as well as Wikipedia to gather some of the basic information so people can go ahead and, check a few things there. But like you said, it was really his interview in 1989 that I thought was going to be a big whistleblower moment. That's when I'd actually first heard about him. I must have still been, 8, 9 years old.
Yeah, 89. I was 5.
So he did an interview with George Knapp at Las Vegas television station KLAS, claiming that he was working at Papoose Lake, which is south of the Area 51 at Groom Lake that we all have heard about over the years, and that he was there and brought in to work on propulsion systems for these craft that they had. Where was your entry point into Bob Lazar?
I think I first listened to him on Rogan, admittedly. And then shortly after that, I followed it up with the documentary on Bob Lazar. I think it was on Netflix. And yes, the
Jeremy Corbell one.
After that, it was just kind of a mirage of interviews and articles, and yeah.
With Bob Lazar, I got into looking into UFOs and ufology very early. I would say my teenage years, and that's when I first started hearing about Bob Lazar. He was a major figure of ufology, and still very much is. And his story is just so interesting. And if you did any kind of investigative work into UFOs, even peripherally, you very early learn about Bob Lazar and his story. And so Bob Lazar I've known about for a long time. I'm glad that he finally is kind of getting the spotlight shown on him. So, him being on a bunch of different podcasts and him being interviewed and doing his documentary, I think is great for him, especially for a man who has been lauded for years upon years now.
And a lot of the late 80s and early 90s, when I first started hearing about him, I want to say like an Unsolved Mysteries episode or something along those lines, which I was obsessed with.
Great show.
Oh, great. Definitely had to spark so many of these podcasts that we're listening to these days as well. But I remember, them talking about trying to discredit him, basically. He was claiming he worked at MIT or had a degree from MIT and Stanford and all these places that basically have no record of him anymore.
Yep. Yeah, that very much includes places that he claimed to work even before Area 51. It was kind of when he came out and talked to George Knapp about the things that were going on at Area 51, that was the first time that anybody had ever heard of Area 51. And, immediately the people who wanted to discredit him started saying, there is no Area 51, there is no S4, what are you talking about? Even going as far back as saying, you never worked here, you never did this, you never went to school. And there was always little things, and thanks to George Knapp and his investigative work, he really found out that there were parts to this that he really unfolded the lie. So he called his former employer and he said, hey, did you guys ever have a man named Bob Lazar working there? And they said, no, we have no record of Bob Lazar. And he got a hold of their phone book, their internal employee phone book, and found Bob Lazar's name. and contacted them again and said, hey, I just found his name in your employee handbook. And they go, oh, yeah. We do have a record here somewhere of him working. We're not sure what he did. And just kind of, more discrediting of Bob Lazar. And I think it really boils down to trying to quiet the man.
I agree, because that was at the Los Alamos National Laboratory that you're talking about there. And he had, gotten I think it was, national attention from newspapers in 1982 when he basically strapped a jet engine to his car. And they just tried to deny that he worked there again. It was weird.
Yeah, I feel like as soon as he came out and tried to blow the whistle on this whole thing and disclose this, they went back and they said, all right, we got to make this man a ghost. He said he went to school here and he worked here and he did this and he did that. We're just going to wipe him off the face of the earth. Like he didn't exist. And that in itself is kind of, it kind of worked against them, really, because they went and said that he didn't go to these schools and he didn't attend these universities. He didn't go to these, he didn't work at these places, but they almost scrubbed him too clean, because then there was zero background about where Bob Lazar came from. There was no prior, he worked over here instead of over here. There was no, he went to school over here instead of over here. And he definitely was in, he was in the position, a scientific position. He was schooled, he was educated. He definitely was a part of those programs. So when they wiped him clean, I think that kind of worked against them. And the real people of the community looked at it and said, there's something wrong here.
Like you said, today's day and age, it's kind of hard to wipe somebody out with the digital trails that we leave all day, every day. But yeah, in the late 80s, early 90s, it was a whole lot easier to go back through and wipe someone clean of records, because you had to go physically deal with paper copies most of the time if you wanted to prove someone was there. So, without, like you said, having a background information in place where, okay, this is how he got his education, he just had a little too much knowledge and a little too much that you could still prove, like the strapping a jet engine to his car and the phone book from the Los Alamos National Lab. He said that that's basically how he got recruited into S4, was that jet car. They wanted him to see if he could do anything with the propulsion of these craft over there. And that gets us into Element 115. Have you guys heard much about this?
A little bit, yeah. I recall hearing about it during that Bob Lazar documentary. They touched on it.
Apparently, his assertion rather is that it's a stable isotope of element 115, which generates a gravity wave that allows the vehicle to evade visual detection by bending light around it. Now, we didn't know that element 115 existed until much later, first synthesized in 2003, actually, and we can only get minute quantities that last a few hundred milliseconds. Yet he's talking about this, in 1989.
Yeah. What was it called? Unpentium? It was a very weird name. Yeah.
Unumpentium, something like that.
Moscovium.
I think it's now Moscovium.
Yes, it's a very weird element. Like you said, it lasts for just super, super short periods of time. It's completely man-made. It has a weird amount of, I forget if it's electrons or neutrons. It's got some weird amount, or is it atoms? I'm not sure. One of those scientific words. It has an odd number.
Yes.
And some people would say, oh, well, he just said element 115, knowing that eventually one day we would have an element 115 and whatever the case may be. But again, it's he called it out years and years prior, and he described it perfectly, and the element that later came out in 2003 was exactly what he described. And I think along the way, if you look at a long enough timeline of Bob Lazar, you see that along the way he very much is like, he's rectified. He had come out with so much information, especially regarding this element and how he had reverse engineered it and worked on it, and for it to come out and to be exactly like he said, that's got to be. I could only imagine the feeling that he felt when it was just like, yeah, all right, I said that, and now, nobody can deny it.
The thing that jumped out at me most about that, I think, was you heard about the hand scanner that he was describing for years.
Same point, that hand scanner, that was like the most minute detail, in my opinion, that could have been validated, but at the same time, like, you can't just make something like that up and have it actually come true. Like with the element 115 thing, yeah, you could say, oh well, he knew, element 115 would be a thing eventually, but who's gonna think up that hand scanner security system and then have it actually be released that it's a thing?
Yeah, because it wasn't like he was saying it was scanning our fingerprints, or it was taking our palm print or something. He was talking about it measuring the distance between the bones and the veins and all these things that it was actually doing. That it was in like a handful of very highly classified sites. Where was he going to get access to that?
Yeah, and then later on, they I forget his name, but he was a pilot at the time, working for the government, and he was definitely a part of Area 51 and worked there. And he had later on said, "Oh yeah, I remember Bob Lazar walking around the hangars and walking around the offices per se." And other people would back that up, and other people had said, "Yeah, I remember Bob. Bob would, blah, 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 blah." So they had knowledge that he worked there, and it was corroborated by a good handful of people.
Definitely agree. I know that there's a lot of things that he talked about. One of the things I want to get into is that he actually claimed during the program that there were briefing documents describing historical involvement of basically the last 10,000 years of Earth history with extraterrestrials. Yeah. I highly doubt that the government is going to be giving us any information along those lines on the 24th. But have you heard anything about this?
If I recall correctly, didn't they throw these files at him like right after he started his position with this work? That's just insane to me.
So it's something, I think they said the one that he was working on was from aliens on a twin binary star system in Zeta Reticuli, I guess. Now, that is something we don't know of any extrasolar, I guess, instead of exosolar planets in that system right now. But you also start wondering, all right, how much information are they going to give them, or how much disinformation would they be also wanting to provide as well?
Yeah, I would believe even at those highest levels of top secret that everything is very compartmentalized. And like you said, how much of what they gave him is true. The Zeta Reticuli trope, it dates all the way back to Betty and Barney Hill incident. And, looking at that system, they looked at it, they said, there's no 2-star system there. And it's hard to say, because what are we basing it on? We're basing it on visual cues. So we're looking through a telescope, or we're looking through electromagnetic, telescopes to see if there is a 2-star system there. But also remember there is the distance that light travels. So it's like the whole, you're seeing the light of a star that died, a million years ago or whatever it may be. So maybe we're looking at Zeta Reticuli and saying, yeah, there's no two-star system there, but it's how many light years away, and in that time frame, could a star have been born?
Or destroyed.
Or destroyed, exactly. So any amount of things could happen in distant galaxies that we wouldn't know about in our lifetimes. So it's kind of a weird, it's a 50-50. It's either we give, they gave him disinformation just to keep him working, or they gave him something real that they got information from some other entity on.
Well, and as we're talking about it now, I mean, it's hard to believe information as well. So it just, it makes people instantly question and go, oh, he's a conspiracy theorist, which is such a derogatory term these days.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah. Especially with the term.
No, go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, especially that term is, like you said, very derogatory, but people keep perpetuating it. So,
yeah, well, we can't change ourselves from UFO to UAP like they did. Unfortunately, conspiracy realist is the one that I like to go with from Stuff They Don't Want You to Know. I do agree with that name, at least. Mm-hmm. Because, yeah, there are a lot of theories out there, but there's also a lot of reality that we're not privy to.
Very true.
Now, one of the things he talked about was that there were, I think, 9 different types of craft that he was saying that were in there, including some that were found on archaeological digs. Any thoughts on that?
Well, the thought of ancient aliens, right, has always been prominent. I don't think that you can discredit that. If you do believe that they were working on possible modern UFOs or UAPs, whatever you want to describe them as, to say that there aren't any that are from potential archaeological digs would be a little bit absurd, in my opinion, because the span of time from these ancient civilizations to now on Earth, it's a speck of astrological, time. So if aliens were to be able to travel here from wherever now, they would have had to have been able to way back then. And you've got the incident of the Roswell crash, which is like the most popular crash that, comes to mind.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's dozens of other ones that are modern that, people have no idea about. So if that's happening now in today's day and age, I'm sure it happened back then. And I'm sure if alien beings are interested in our civilization now, they were probably just as interested back then, just kind of see the growth of a planet as a whole. I would definitely say that there's some validity to UFOs being pulled out of archaeological digs.
Especially if you subscribe to the idea that ancient civilizations were actually more technologically advanced than we are today. So there is the idea that famed doom cities such as Atlantis really did exist, and they were massively technologically advanced. They pull up artifacts that they can't explain. If you look at the cutting of stone, it looks like it's cut by laser precision. There's a lot of things that they can't explain from the ancient world and from archaeological finds. So if you can go with that idea, then it's not very far off to think that these alien civilizations did visit us at one time and did see what we were up to and what we were doing. it's only natural. It's as if, if the human race tomorrow was able to travel to different star systems, the first thing that we would do is look for civilizations elsewhere. And it's kind of that the I forget what it's called, but it's part of like the Star Trek world, like Gene Roddenberry, where you don't interact with a civilization that is lesser than you, because you don't want to give them more advanced technology, and you don't want to ruin the natural progression of their civilization. So I really believe that if UFOs and UAPs are alien and they've been coming here for millions of years and they've been observing us, that's what they are. They are watchers, and they're adhering to, we're not getting involved.
The Prime Directive.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, I really believe that if they are here, it's why we haven't made contact of any substantial kind. That they are just watching us. They're just observing what we do and how we morph into whatever we become next.
Well, you brought up Atlantis, and I have to at least touch back on that. Do you know much about Graham Hancock or Randall Carlson?
Yes, yeah. We talk about those two quite a lot on our show. We've mentioned them quite a few times. We're actually trying to get at least one of them to be a guest on the show at some point. So
I will definitely be tuning in for it. Randall Carlson talks about a number of either impact events or things of the sort where he thinks civilization has basically been wiped out multiple times over our history. And we're talking about our brains have basically been the same. We've been the same humans for 200,000 years, but we do nothing until 12,000 years ago. It does seem a little odd.
Yeah, very, very odd. Yeah, it's kind of this explosion that happens at a certain point in the timeline where we start making big changes and we become a completely different civilization. But if you look at the Earth, there are a million and one ways that we should have been wiped out. Super volcanoes, natural climate change, overpopulation, underpopulation, war, even from an astrological standpoint, asteroids. So over a period of time, one of those things has to hit. So the thought of Randall Carlson and him saying that we've been wiped out many times, it kind of holds water. If you really look at the dangers that we face as a race over time, there's kind of no way that we've avoided asteroids since the dinosaurs. We've had asteroids hit since then. Solar flares, whatever it may be. There's so many things that could have wiped us out over a time period.
Well, you mentioned the solar flares, and I did a little bit on the Carrington event. If something like that happened in today's day and age, it would, wipe out the eastern seaboard and then some. And then with asteroid impacts, it's starting to look like the Younger Dryas impact was, two impacts about 1,000 years apart, and maybe the start of and end of the last ice ages. It's a crazy thing to think about.
Yeah, absolutely wild.
So on the Atlantis side of things, do you think that there could be, is that how we would have gotten some of the pyramid building, things like that, trying to pass on information from a previous civilization?
It has to be something along those lines. It didn't. I don't think it came out of nowhere. I don't think that the Egyptians said, "Hey, let's just build these 3 giant mega structures out here in the middle of the desert. I mean, I'm sure at the time there was, civilization based all the way around the Giza pyramids, but yeah, I definitely believe that it was based off of some other civilization, maybe a civilization that they were working with at the time or communicated with at the time, or even were at war with something. Um, I with Atlantis, it's tough because people say Atlantis and they think of this one underwater city, this giant ancient civilization that got lost at sea throughout continental shifts and things of that nature. But I can't help but wonder how many civilizations are there like that, kind of looping back to when you were mentioning how many times has civilization been wiped out. And throughout the geological changes of the planet through millennia, who really knows how many times something like that has happened, how many civilizations have been lost and are just buried, whether it be in the earth or in the ocean. But yeah, I definitely think that the Egyptians, they got some influence from somewhere to build those pyramids.
I also like to think about, the Sphinx. The more and more information we get on that, well, one, it didn't used to have a human face. It was a lion head before somebody else recarved it. We've basically proven that as well. But it's got water damage from rain, and the last time there was enough rain in the area to do that was 10,000 years before it was supposed to have been built.
Yeah. Yeah, timelines are a funny thing. When it comes to Atlantis, I have a different thought on it. So, like, if you break down the word Atlantis, it directly translates to island of Atlas. So, Atlas, if you think of the world, it's really island of the world. So, is it possible that we think of Atlas or Atlantis as this singular place, when in reality Atlantis could have been a conglomerate of tribes, a big formation of many different lands put together? Think about where you find pyramids. You have the pyramids in South America. You have pyramids in supposedly Antarctica. You have pyramids in Egypt. Pyramids are found worldwide. They're not only local to Egypt. And I think that Atlantis was just kind of a Pangea, a large land structure that broke up for whatever reason. But within that land structure, I really believe that there was just this mass gathering of a lot of different cultures and a lot of different tribes and a lot of different groups of people that came together and kind of made this amazing utopia where people live together in harmony. But maybe that's the hippie in me that wants to believe that. But I don't necessarily believe that Atlantis was a singular place or a singular kingdom. I think it was just a myriad of different people together.
I tend to think along those lines as well. Please, Frank, you were going to say.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, Mike, I've never thought of it like that, and that is an amazing thought, and I think it brings even more validity to the idea of ancient aliens, because in modern days, people that try to discredit extraterrestrials and UFOs, UAPs, one of their main arguments is, like we've said before, why haven't they contacted us yet? And proponents of extraterrestrials will normally say something along the lines of, oh, well, we're a violent species, we're at war, we're stupid, we don't have our priorities right, we're not working together. It shows stupidity among the human race as a whole, and why would aliens want to work with that? But if you bring it back millennia to an idea of Pangea, of a whole entire world, all of these separate tribes coming together and building one large civilization where they lived peacefully and harmoniously, then I think, that would be a time as good as any for aliens to come through and kind of work with them. And then, in all of these pyramid structures, you see evidence of possible ancient alien type stuff throughout the hieroglyphs, and like we said, the architecture. I think that kind of ties that up pretty well, honestly.
I know that one of the things that I always used to think about is if Atlantis was spread around as an actual civilization, like a confederation of states kind of thing, or however else it was playing out. When you think about all the flood myths that happen, and then if you link that to, and I'm going to link a few things here, if you link those flood myths to the Younger Dryas impacts and how it just basically changed the entire shape of especially North America, but all over the world, then you hear about survivors of Atlantis, like that kind of a theory where they're going out and they're, spreading over to Egypt, spreading over to the Middle East, some going, Quetzalcoatl is supposed to be a white guy kind of that came and showed the Inca and the Aztec their ways. So there's this interesting overlap where an impact really could have changed everything in an instant, yet still some of this knowledge survived.
Yeah. And when Plato talked about Atlantis, he described the founders of Atlantis as half gods and half human. Mm-hmm. So, and that if you're thinking about Plato, is he talking in riddle? Is he kind of, using conjecture there, or is he just being very direct about it and saying, yeah, they were gods? You bring up Quetzalcoatl. That's a great example. If you look, from Mesopotamia and the Inca and the Mayan and a lot of different civilizations that used like carving reliefs and stuff like that, you'll see this one main figure, and everybody's seen it if you've really looked into it. There's this figure, and usually it has the head of a bird or some sort of bird-like features, but it's carrying this purse.
Yes,
it almost looks like a messenger bag. And that's across the world. That's different civilizations. That's different continents. Why would all these people come up with the same imagery?
It's at Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah, and that imagery is very unique. It's one thing if you create some sort of god figure that has, the bird head or has those features, but to also include that little detail of it carrying some sort of bag or some sort of package, whatever it's translated to be, is I think is very interesting in itself.
Why they felt it was so important to include that package or bag all over the carvings. It makes you wonder what was so important inside of that. What was the detail they were trying to leave us?
Yeah. Plutonium core.
You also mentioned Plato, and I thought it's interesting that he said 9,000 years before Solon, which actually, when you do the math, I'm pretty sure it was Graham Hancock where I heard this, that it lines up right to the Younger Dryas impact. Lots of little coincidences.
Yeah. It's a very interesting thing, and I really believe that Graham Hancock, he's another one. He's kind of an outlier, along with Randall Carlson and their whole thought process. I think they are going to be another group of people that are going to be vindicated one day. I think they already kind of are. They're
starting for sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot of archaeologists and historians out there that discredit them. They call them fringe, fringe science or fringe archaeology, um, and it's mostly because, and as Graham Hancock will say in many of his interviews, it's because you have these archaeologists who are very set in their ways, and they're very set in their timelines, and they're very set in what they know about these things, and what they were taught in school. But you can't deny the evidence that's there, and there's a lot of evidence that civilizations did go through multiple wipeouts. There are, there's so much science behind it, and there's so much fact behind it. I think it's hard. It's almost impossible to ignore. But you definitely have the groups of people and the experts per se that are holding out, and they're saying no, that's not real. That can't be real. That can't be real. And it's a you have to be very within the box if you're an archaeologist or a historian. You can't really venture outside of those parameters and say, well, we've been taught this, but could it have been this? And that makes you a pariah, and that's why Graham Hancock has become that pariah, because he's challenged the narrative that we've all come to know and have learned about for almost 100 years now. So
he talks about the career killers, the things that they will run people out of the sciences for talking about.
Yeah, see, that's really prominent in science right now. And I think it's kind of disgusting, honestly. Like, it kind of defeats the purpose. Like, when you're a young person and you decide that you want to be a scientist and figure out the natures and the wonders of the world, and then you grow up to be this cranky, inside the books, by the books sort of person that will reject any idea that is outside of your comfort zone or outside of your mentality of thinking. I just think that's kind of wrong, like defeating the purpose completely.
Yeah, definitely agree. Before we start to wrap up here, I am curious if disclosure is disappointing, if they basically do a denial or a non-denial, we don't know what it is, we can't tell you anymore kind of a thing. Do you think that's going to lead to any more or any credible whistleblowers like Bob Lazar thought that would come out after he did?
Mm-hmm. I do believe that there are people within the intelligence community, within different military regimes that do want this disclosure. They do want to tell the people really what's going on. Most recently, you have Lou Elizondo, who is, his superstar status at this point, as a guy who came out essentially as a whistleblower, and he's telling this story, and Jeremy Corbell is out there, and he's working and trying to get this story out there along with George Knapp, and you have these figureheads who are very much leading the charge to try and get the truth, and they're trying to get the real situation from the government. But you have to remember, a government's their duty is to themselves. That you think that it's for the American people, but it's really not. Governments are only for themselves. And if they give up information, they give up power, because as we all know, information is the most powerful thing on this earth. It's not money, it's not riches, it's not gold. It's information. And a government giving up all its information, especially when it comes to future tech or alien tech or anything along those guidelines, it's kind of asinine to think that a government is going to give up everything. And they're not. I've said it from the beginning. they're not going to give us everything that we hope that we're going to. They think that people think that we're going to get pictures of alien autopsies, and we're going to get some alien ambassador coming on CNN and telling us how we should be living our lives. It's not happening that way. If anything, they're going to say, look, we don't know. We don't know if it's another country with more advanced technology, or we don't know if it's alien made, or we don't know if it's this or that. I think it's going to be a collective shoulder shrug from them, and say, this is everything that we've gathered on it, but we still don't know. Even if they do know, they're not going to say it. And I do believe that there will be whistleblowers. There will be more people other than Lou, other than Jeremy and George and all these other people that are in the ufology community. I really do believe that there will be different agents that will come out, and they will say, look, the government hasn't been telling you the truth. This is what's really going on. And in return and in response to that, the government will turn around and try to, downplay those people and destroy their credibility, much like they did. They did with Bob Lazar, and they're trying now to do with Lou Elizondo. That's their whole thing, is they're going to try to silence those whistleblowers. But yes, there will definitely be those people that want the truth to get out at any cost, to their personal harm or to their careers. They're not going to care. They're going to do what they think is right. And we will see more disclosure, just not from our government.
I really couldn't have said it better, Mike. I don't think that there's going to be more disclosure from the government after this point. The Pentagon kind of had their hand forced by Donald Trump when he signed that bill saying they had to disclose by, X amount of days. And I do agree that there will be more whistleblowers, but they're not going to have that backup confirmation from the Pentagon. I think this is going to be their opportunity to put out as little as possible real information, if not complete misinformation, to the public to kind of ease their minds and fulfill them and just kind of close the curtains promptly. And that'll be the end of it, besides, the straggler whistleblowers that we'll have here and there. And, hopefully some really prominent figures come out that are, really reliable sources and disclose things on their own terms.
I definitely think it's going to come from more people like Commander Fravor, the one-off people who have had the personal experiences, rather than getting a full package of disclosure like we thought we were going to be getting,
Yeah.
And it's probably for the best that way, honestly. I would trust these personal accounts more so than a disclosure bill from the Pentagon, honestly, because you've got these people in high places that are essentially putting their career on the line to disclose information. Whereas with the Pentagon, like I said, they kind of had their hand forced.
Definitely agree. Well, thank you guys very much for joining me here today. Do you want to tell people the best places to reach you at and where to be contacting you guys?
Sure. It's very easy, honestly. You can reach us over at hushhushsociety.com. From there, you can see all of our episodes. You can get our merch store. You can see where we're dispersed. We're on all the podcast aggregates, Apple, Spotify, the usual places that you listen to podcasts. And reach out to us. We're always willing to take topics from listeners and from other people, especially things that we haven't touched on, things that we've never heard of. So feel free to reach out to us on our website. Again, that's hushhushsociety.com. And thank you so much, John, for having us on.
Yeah, thanks, John. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
Thank you, guys. Hope to see you again soon. Thank Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this exchange as much as I did. It was a great experience, and I want to thank all of the guys at the Hush Hush Society. I hope we're able to collaborate again sometime soon. They cover so many fun topics on their podcast. I hope you check them out yourself. I also want to give a special thanks to all of our listeners. You are the reason I'm doing this. Please tell your friends about us. Follow us on Spotify, subscribe to us on YouTube, or wherever else you're listening, and please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts if you can. Every podcast says that because it does help with visibility. You can also support us on Patreon or connect with us on the social media of your choice. We are at Awakened Exchanges on Facebook and Instagram, and at Awaken Exchanges on Twitter. Thanks again, and have a blessed day.